Welcome to Mishna study, Masechet Terumot, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Dalet. Over here in this Mishnah, we're going to discuss what are you allowed, and we're going to start discussing what you allowed and not allowed to separate Terumah from, right? So if we open up the first Mishnah, there are 5 people that are not allowed to separate Terumah. Well, here we're going to have the same title, En Tormi, we're not allowed to separate Terumah, but instead of from the person who's not allowed to separate Terumah, now we're going to speak about from different items themselves that you're not allowed to separate Terumah from. So just as a quick introduction, we need to always remember that Terumah is hayab. You have to separate Terumah from pirot, from fruits, and also from 2 processed items, and that is oil and wine, right? So grapes in its final state, right? In its more pristine state of wine, and then olives also in its more pristine state of olive oil. Right? That's what you're hayab to separate Terumah from. Obviously, if you separate it as olives, you don't have to separate that same thing as oil, right? But if you're making it as oil, right, you have to say you make it, you turn it into oil, right? You produce the oil, and then you separate the Terumah from the oil itself. Now, here in our Mishnah, we're going to see what if you want to separate now olives. Let's say you have a barrel of olives, and you have a jug of olive oil. And you say, oh, you know what? I want to give the Kohen the olives. Instead of giving him, from the olive oil, taking 2% off the olive oil and giving that to the Kohen, so you know what? I'll take that share's worth from the olives themselves. Right? I'll give him all these olives instead of giving him from the oil. Are you allowed to do that? And if you did it, does it count? Okay, that's going to be the discussion. So firstly, en tormim, you're not allowed. So there's your answer. En tormim zetim ala shem. You're not allowed to separate, go ahead and take olives and try to give that as your terumah to the Kohen to cover your olive oil. Velo anavim alayayim. Nor are you allowed to separate grapes to cover the wine. Ve'im taram, let's say he did so. Bet Shammai omrim terumat atzman bahim. Right? Bet Shammai says that the terumah is within it, meaning what? Now that you separated those grapes, right? Those olives or those grapes, it counts for those olives and grapes themselves, right? And if you want to now go ahead and, drink that olive oil, okay, now you need to separate oil again, right? From that second barrel. Right, so if you separated, olives, okay. So if there are other olives left over, good. So you took terumah from those olives and you covered the rest of the batch of the olives, but you did not cover the olive oil. Olive oil, you'd have to separate terumah again. And it's similar for grapes, where you separated from the grapes, you gave to the Kohen. Okay, so the rest of the grapes are good. You covered the grapes, you separated terumah now. But now for the rest of the wine, no, you have to go ahead and re-separate wine. Bet Hillel omrim en terumatan terumah. Bet Hillel says it doesn't count at all. It's interesting because Bet Hillel is more mahmir over here. It doesn't count at all. Now, both of them agree with the limud, actually, both of them agree that you're not allowed to the hatachila at all. And they learned this from the Sifre, right? It says, Shome'ani yitrom shibolim al hatim. Right? I could have thought that I could go ahead and separate some of the shibolim, the grains and stalks to cover the hitat, to cover the wheat. I could have thought I could separate grapes to cover wine, and zetim, olives to cover shemen. No, it comes to teach us. The pasuk says, "Kedagan min hagoren." I am separating dagan, the grain, from the goren, from the threshing floor, right? But it says, right, min hagoren. They learn here min hagoren, min hagamur, from the finished product, from the final state. So wine, you have to separate wine as terumah. Oil, you have to separate oil as terumah. This is the limud that you need to do so, the chatahila. Rambam points out, according to Bet Hillel, why is it not considered terumah at all, right? And he says in the Chibur, in the Mishnah Torah, he goes, even b'di avad, it's asur, like our Mishnah, shemeh yatriach hakohen lidroch v'lichtosh, because we don't want to cause the kohen to do extra work, right? That's not fair to him, right? We want to go ahead and give him the final product, as it finishes off. And halacha is like Bet Hillel, that you're not allowed to go ahead and do so. And if you did so, it's not considered terumah at all.